After awakening, many people begin to notice that life feels quieter than before. This quiet does not arrive dramatically. It arrives subtly, almost unnoticed. At first, you may think nothing has changed, but slowly you realize that the constant inner pressure you once lived with has softened. Before awakening, life often felt crowded with thoughts, crowded with expectations, crowded with urgency. There was always something to fix, something to improve, something to chase. This constant movement felt normal. It felt like motivation. It felt like ambition. After awakening, much of that movement dissolves, not because life loses meaning, but because unnecessary tension begins to fall away. What remains is simplicity. This simplicity is not about doing less on the outside. It is about wanting less on the inside. At first, this can feel confusing. You may wonder why you no longer feel driven in the same way. You may question whether you are losing momentum. But what is actually happening is not a loss of motivation. It is the release of false urgency. False urgency once told you that you were behind, that you needed to hurry, that time was running out. After awakening, this urgency no longer controls your inner world. And when urgency fades, life naturally slows. This slowing can feel uncomfortable, especially if speed once felt like proof of worth. You may notice yourself pausing more, reacting less, choosing more carefully. This does not mean you care less. It means you are no longer operating from survival. Before awakening, much of your motivation was fueled by fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of falling behind. As fear loosens, many desires soften as well. This is why life begins to feel simpler. You are no longer chasing fulfillment outside yourself. You are no longer trying to outrun an inner sense of lack. Instead, you begin to notice what is already present, what is already enough. When striving quiets, the mind may interpret this as emptiness. But emptiness is not what you are experiencing. What you are experiencing is space. Space that was once filled with anxiety. Space once occupied by comparison. As these patterns dissolve, simplicity emerges naturally. You may notice that situations which once felt urgent no longer demand immediate reaction. You pause before responding. This is not indifference, it is discernment. Awakening does not make you less alive. It makes you less reactive. Reactivity once created intensity. But intensity rooted in reactivity is exhausting. As life becomes simpler, you may feel less drawn to drama, less interested in emotional turbulence. This can feel unfamiliar if intensity once defined your sense of being alive. But depth after awakening becomes quieter, more stable. Stability can feel flat at first, but flatness is balance. Balance allows clarity to emerge. You begin to understand yourself more honestly. You see where you were forcing, where you were abandoning yourself. This awareness naturally simplifies life. You stop paying for things with your peace. You stop trading your energy for what drains you. You are not becoming smaller. You are becoming more coherent. And coherence does not need complexity. This simplicity is not the end of your journey. It is the foundation of what comes next. After awakening, desire begins to change in a noticeable way. You may still want things, but the wanting no longer feels urgent. Before, desire often came from a sense of lack. You wanted things because you believed something was missing. After awakening, that sense of missing softens. Desire does not disappear. It becomes quieter and more selective. You no longer feel pushed to chase goals just to feel worthy. You begin to notice which desires are genuine and which were conditioned. Some ambitions lose their emotional charge. This can feel confusing at first. You may wonder why goals that once motivated you no longer excite you. It is not because you failed. It is because those goals belong to an older version of you. As fear-based motivation fades, action begins to come from clarity rather than pressure. You act because something feels aligned, not because you are afraid of falling behind. This new motivation is calmer. It does not rush. From the outside, this may look like slowing down, but internally, you are becoming more intentional. You begin to notice how often you once acted against yourself. How often you said yes while feeling resistance. After awakening, that resistance becomes impossible to ignore. You start honoring it. Honoring resistance simplifies life. You stop forcing conversations that drain you. You stop committing to things that feel heavy. Another shift happens in how you relate to identity. You feel less attached to labels and roles, less invested in maintaining a certain image. This can feel destabilizing at first. If you are not who you used to be, who are you now? This question does not need an immediate answer. Awakening invites you to experience yourself without constant definition. You begin to see that much of your identity was built around coping. Coping once kept you safe. Now it quietly limits you. As coping patterns soften, space opens. In that space, uncertainty may arise. But uncertainty is not a problem. It is openness. Openness allows new values to emerge. You begin to value honesty over performance, peace over approval. These values may not impress others, but they feel true to you. As motivation becomes internal rather than external, mental noise decreases. You trust yourself more. Decisions become simpler, not because life is easy, but because inner conflict has lessened. You may still face challenges, but you meet them with steadiness instead of panic. This steadiness is one of the quiet gifts of awakening. It allows you to move through life without constantly fighting yourself. When you stop fighting yourself, life naturally becomes simpler. As life becomes simpler after awakening, many people begin to notice a quiet sense of freedom. This freedom does not come from having more options. It comes from needing fewer. Before, freedom was imagined as endless choice, more possibilities, more control. But endless choice often creates exhaustion. After awakening, freedom takes a different form. It feels like relief. Relief from constant self-correction. Relief from explaining yourself. Relief from living in reaction to expectations. You no longer need to keep adjusting who you are. This is why simplicity feels liberating. When you stop managing appearances, energy returns to you. You may notice that your days feel lighter, not because nothing happens, but because less is resisted. Resistance once made everything feel heavy. After awakening, resistance softens. You begin to accept what is happening without immediately fighting it. This acceptance is not resignation. It is cooperation with reality. When you cooperate with reality, life stops feeling like a battle. This is one of the deepest shifts. You no longer see life as something to conquer. You begin to experience it as something to participate in. Participation does not require constant effort. It requires presence. Presence simplifies everything. When you are present, you are not living in imagined futures. You are not replaying the past. You are here. Being here reduces mental noise. Mental noise once created the illusion of complexity. Without that noise, life feels more direct. You respond instead of react. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You speak when something matters. You move when something aligns. You stop filling space unnecessarily. Silence becomes comfortable. Comfort with silence is a sign of inner stability. Many people fear silence because it removes distraction. After awakening, silence becomes a companion. In silence, you sense what is true. This truth does not come as dramatic insight. It comes as quiet knowing. You simply know when something fits. You know when it does not. This knowing reduces overthinking. Overthinking once felt like responsibility. Now it feels unnecessary. You trust yourself more. Trust simplifies decision-making. You no longer need endless reassurance. You listen inward and act accordingly. This inner trust is not arrogance. It is familiarity with yourself. As familiarity grows, life becomes less intimidating. You stop bracing for impact. You stop expecting collapse. This does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you stop catastrophizing imperfection. Problems still arise, but they no longer define your identity. You face them without turning them into stories about failure. This is freedom. Freedom from constantly narrating your life as a problem. Simplicity also changes how you relate to time. You stop rushing toward the future. You stop postponing peace. Peace is no longer a reward. It becomes the ground you stand on. From that ground, action feels different. You still grow. You still move forward. But growth feels organic, not forced. You allow things to unfold. Allowing does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what is necessary without panic. This calm efficiency is often misunderstood. It does not seek attention, but it is powerful. When you are no longer driven by fear, your choices become cleaner. Clean choices simplify life. You choose what nourishes you. You release what drains you. This is not selfishness. It is self-respect. Self-respect simplifies relationships. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop shrinking to be accepted. This may reduce your circle, but it strengthens your center. A strong center does not need constant validation. This is why simplicity feels like freedom. You are no longer pulled in many directions. You are not scattered. You are gathered within yourself. Being gathered feels grounded. It feels steady. This steadiness is the quiet joy of awakening. It does not shout. It does not perform. It simply is. And once you taste this simplicity, you no longer want to return to unnecessary struggle. Not because struggle disappears, but because you stop creating it internally. Life does not become smaller, it becomes clearer, and clarity is the deepest form of freedom.